How good are the 2022 Boston Uprising? That is the golden question that we have all gathered here today to answer. Will this finally be the year that Boston regains their relevance and maybe has a good-looking team? Or are they in for more of what we've seen the last couple of years? In order to properly evaluate Boston, it's important to start by recapping their offseason to understand how and why they got here. Let us begin with what they decided to get rid of. The Uprising dumped 6 players at the start of October. Those players are Fusions, Color Hex, Myungbong, I'm 37, Stand 1, and Gay Bolsey, and that left the team with Valentine, Faith, and Punk by the time they were done cleaning house. And all the guys they dumped, maybe aside from 1 or 2 of them, are going to not really trigger any potential feelings of sadness. The major one that everybody's going to turn their eyes to is obviously Myungbong. This guy was one of the only players considered to be a star for the Boston Uprising franchise in the last couple of years. Boston fans are especially thankful for his heroics on Ana back in 2020. It's obvious that he's capable of being an absolute superstar level player in this league. He just wasn't given the proper resources to realize that potential on Boston, and just when the Uprising finally did wipe away some of the stuff that they didn't need and are looking to make some improvements, it was already too late. It's a shame that Myungbong couldn't lead a respectable Boston team. You could tell that it was something he desperately wanted to accomplish, but alas, it just wasn't meant to be. It's a little sad to see him go, but it's far from the end of the world. Myungbong had potential, but he may not have been the answer Boston were looking for if they wished to win now. His performance last year just wasn't as impactful as his rookie year. Not to mention that his hero pool isn't exactly perfect. His Ana, yeah, it's absolutely ridiculous, but his BAP and Zen definitely needed some work. Boston had an opportunity to upgrade the flex support position and, well, they took it. Then you have the other guy that I personally am a bit sad to see go, and that is Gay Bolsey. He showed promise at his peak in Korean contenders, but it just didn't translate to success at the Overwatch League level so far. He didn't get much playtime on Boston at all, and it's pretty obvious why. As much as I love this dude, he just was not league ready yet. I would have loved to see Gay Bolsey get another year to develop, but he just wasn't needed on the Boston Uprising. Punk can cover everything that he can, and clearly he can do it better. It's tough to see all that potential never got unlocked, but Boston kind of made the right choice here, just as they did with a lot of their roster. They freed up a good bit of space, especially when you consider what they managed to get rid of. Stand 1 and I'm 37 were just okay players and were clearly replaceable. Then you have Color Hex, who was arguably one of the weakest flex DPS options in the entire league, and Fusions, who was never getting played anyway. Management was able to clear away the random things that didn't work out, plus the leftovers from an era before Coach Laurie took over. This is the first year where Coach Laurie actually gets an opportunity to build a team from the ground up in his vision alone. So that put us in a situation where Boston held on to Valentine, Faith, and Punk, plus all of the coaches, and then they went from there. And I'd say that they created a rather deep roster just from a sheer number standpoint, and a bunch of the guys they got look pretty good. The big news obviously comes through Striker's homecoming. In a very interesting turn of events, Striker decided to end his retirement and return to the very team that started his journey. Striker was literally one of the best players available in this free agency class. Even before he suddenly retired last year, he was still playing at a superstar level. He is one of the most dominant damage dealers this league has ever known, and he's been a winner his entire career. Now Striker is ready to bring back his winning ways to his original home, where he genuinely might be able to shine way more than he did on San Francisco. The man is sharing the spotlight with absolutely no other superstars currently, so it's not really far-fetched to say that Striker could stand out even more this year. There's a good chance that it kind of feels like the good old days where he'd be the hero of Boston due to his godlike playmaking. I mean, seriously, what a fantastic signing by the Boston Uprising. They got the very thing that they were lacking, and that, my friends, would be star power. A real all-star that can always be counted on time and time again. It's something that they did not have last year. Now they have that nice, reliable superstar DPS, which is going to help the Uprising hopefully play more consistently. Boston are already huge winners in my opinion, just from this one move alone. But it's far from the only move that grabs your attention, because Boston also went out and really increased the versatility they have at flex support with Crimzo and MCD. Now, I for one believe that Myungbong's potential was greater than both of these guys, but last year I'd say that both players arguably had the better season, and this especially goes for crimzo. I believe that both crimzo and MCD could make more of a difference than Myungbong did last year, simply due to the fact that they have better hero coverage. Crimzo was a high-level Baptiste and Zenyatta, with an Ana that was arguably just as good as Myungbong's. Crimzo alone, I think, already gives the Uprising more flexibility, but then you also factor in MCD into this equation, who was one of the top Ana players in the league and a rising star before the whole Spark drama happened, and now Boston, I think, are looking extra good as a result. They don't necessarily have an absolute top-of-the-line flex support rotation, but it's more than adequate. I'm expecting big things out of them due to the versatility and level of play that they showed off in 2021. They're both explosive players who might even get a chance to dominate at the same time if double flex support compositions are a thing. There's only one real concern that comes out of this in my opinion, and that is the idea of giving MCD a second chance. There's going to be a lot of people out there who argue that he does not deserve to be back. Some of the things that he said on the Chinese ranked ladder last year are not acceptable, so just based on that, some fans will be totally against Boston right from the beginning and what they stand for. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you to forgive or not forgive him. You can do whatever you want. I'm just saying that this is in the realm of possibilities now, where this is something Boston's going to have to deal with. Boston have expressed two different statements here. One is that by making this move, they've shown that they're willing to forgive MCD and give him another shot, but also, Boston have made it very clear that they are willing to take the heat if it comes to that. And given this franchise's troubled past, I'm not exactly sure if that's the best idea. They've made the choice though, and now it's on them to deal with any potential consequences that may come with it. Definitely keep an eye on MCD's maturity. Keep it in the back of your mind. Even if you do think he's going to behave himself from this point moving forward, this is a big time factor that's probably going to surround the Boston Uprising for months to come. If the MCD thing does end up working out though, then that's going to be great for them, seeing as he's not just a very talented player, but also he gives this team the chance to possibly run a fully Korean lineup if they feel like it's necessary for a communication standpoint. Those are basically all of the things I have to say about these major moves though. Boston definitely addressed two of the most important positions in the game very effectively here, but what about everywhere else? I'd say that the other spots look okay. Joining the high-potential DPS duo of Striker and Valentine to complete their rotation as of right now is former Uprising Academy hitscan Victoria. He helped play a pretty major role in Uprising Academy's resurgence during the summer and fall. He was a key part of that DPS rotation, oftentimes filling out the sniper and tracer roles, and he was essentially the only thing Boston were missing at their DPS line. Striker can play hitscan for sure, but I think it's smart to have somebody else who truly specializes in this role. Not to mention that now you can run a way better version of a tracer sniper comp compared to if you still had Striker and Valentine. Victoria's not a bad prospect to take a chance on, but at the same time, he's not some groundbreaking talent that everybody is freaking out over. He's good, but I wouldn't exactly call him a top-tier prospect. He could be a good answer in the long term, but exclusively talking about this year, I'm not sure if he's going to be good enough. At the very least though, he does give the Uprising DPS line a feeling of completeness, so I guess it could be worse. On the topic of places where things could be worse, let's talk about what Boston did at tank, which is something that a lot of people are going to be talking about. At first, it seemed like their answer for the main tank heroes was strictly going to be on Marvel. The main was a reliable main tank player during his time on Seoul, but I think that after 2019, coaching kind of just messed up what he could have been. Placing him at off tank, then randomly playing him at main tank throughout the years just destroyed his potential. I, along with many of you I'm assuming, genuinely want to believe that Marvel can still be a great tank player at the Overwatch League level. After that amazing rookie season he had back in the day, he really does deserve a fresh start and a chance to prove himself. He can play all the main tank heroes in the game relatively well, and he's got a solid Sigma. And thanks to his previous experience on off tank, he might be a somewhat flexible in-game option to run. Well, that's initially what I thought at least, because now I'm not so sure. And it's due to the simple fact that Boston signed alexyOWL about a week ago. He's another guy from their academy team, and he played main tank during the Overwatch 1 era. If Boston already had a main tank-like player on their roster, because I guess technically main tanks aren't a thing anymore, why did they feel a need to sign another one? We can't assume anything for certain, but right now I'd say that the general feeling of fans is that the current tank line just wasn't good enough. If they planned on promoting alexyOWL all along, there'd be no reason to pick up Marvel. Is Marvel just not good enough or something? Is he maybe unhappy with Boston currently? Do him and Punk just not cover every tank hero in the game adequately? Or maybe, just maybe, this is all just getting blown way out of proportion. I have no idea what to make of this situation. All I know is, I do not like it. 3 tanks seems a little excessive compared to all of the other rosters in the league. I believe the Spark right now are the only other team with 3 tank players, and technically, one of those guys is only a 2-way. And the worst part about this all for Boston is this new rookie they picked up is by no means a groundbreaking talent. If he was like a god tier rookie, then maybe this would be more understandable. He's an intriguing prospect, yeah, but he doesn't make me feel any better about Boston's tank situation than I did before he joined. So really, Boston's offseason moves at tank make them feel decent, but nothing special. It's a little disappointing, but that's kind of where they stand. That's how Boston's offseason transpired though. They definitely made some nice moves. When looking at the roster as a whole, it's not terrible. Something that I love about them is that they feel like they have more clear-cut strengths compared to 2021. There were a lot more what-ifs on that roster compared to this one. They picked up a bunch of talent from WGS Phoenix, but the rookies were very tough to judge, as well as some of those other random veterans. DPS in general was kind of in a weird place back then, and even Punk had some question marks. How would he perform as the only non-Korean speaker in the lineup a lot of the time? But now that we have the answers to those kinds of questions, we know that Punk can easily thrive under a mostly Korean environment, and it's clear that both Valentine and Faith are capable of being good players. When you add those 3 with crimzo, Striker, and MCD, there's reason to feel more excited about Boston this year. The only problem is, North America has gotten a lot better as a whole, so the roster still might not be good enough. The places you're definitely feeling confident in at least are support plus striker. Crimzo, MCD, Faith, I think that's a solid backline. Maybe not top tier, but still more than good enough to be competitive. They're explosive, intelligent, and flexible enough to hold their own against a good number of competing backlines, and as I said before, Striker gives you a whole bunch of guaranteed star power and carry potential. I'm a firm believer that we're going back to the good old days of 2018 where the rest of the team kind of just plays around him. The only difference now is that his support line is arguably stronger. Well, that and the idea of his tank line maybe being a bit weaker. I have no clue if the Boston Uprising are going to be any good, but something I do know is that Striker is more than capable of willing this team to a few victories all by himself. He'll get way more value and opportunities to carry than on San Francisco, which is obviously great for any Boston or Striker fan out there. He's going to be the leader for this young DPS line. Hopefully he can lead by example to help those guys play with more aggression and confidence. Speaking of the young guys, I have mixed feelings about how the rest of that DPS line holds up. To me, how far they can go likely rests on the shoulders of Valentine. He was decent last year, but now I'm kind of looking for some more growth. His development is going to play a huge factor. If he develops into a somewhat consistent contributor, I feel pretty good about DPS. If not, they're probably just an okay rotation. Valentine and Victoria have so much to prove, but they at least have reasonably high potential. I'm not entirely certain how much they're going to hold up in comparison to an above average hit scan or flex DPS. I'm a bit worried that there's going to be a bit too much pressure on Striker to perform, but I do have hope that both Valentine and Victoria can figure it out, as they honestly might be able to do more in a secondary playmaking role. The less pressure and attention they receive, the better off that Boston might end up being. But honestly, secondary DPS might be the least of their concerns. I think a lot of people are going to be way more worried about what happens with tank. For starters, it doesn't really feel a lot better than last year, if at all. Maybe you have a bit more confidence in their selection of players, but overall, still kind of concerning that there could be some real problems going on here. Unless there's something that we just don't know as of right now, there has to be some sort of performance issue going on with the team. I don't understand why they would get another tank player this late into the year if that wasn't the case. Their coverage and reliability could end up being weaker than the rest of the roster. This position could end up being a struggle. All of their tanks are nothing out of the ordinary. None of them are terrible, but none of them blow you away. Punk, I think that he played well last year. He surpassed expectations, but he's still not really that all-star level player right now. Then you have Marvel, whose consistency and confidence could be all over the place due to his troubled past on Soul. And then you have a rookie tank that we really don't know all that much about yet. There's at least 5, maybe 6 tank lines in North America alone that you likely prefer currently. If there's any good news on this matter, I suppose it's that there's only one tank in the game in a single instance. There's less of an opportunity to get totally tank diffed, but does that make you feel a lot better about what they're working with? Probably not. Nobody was all that excited about Boston's tanks to begin with, but things have kind of gone from bad to worse. Most of the team, I'd say, is pretty likable, but there's just those few places that they're lacking and have severe question marks with. How could I say that they're going to be noticeably better than last year? I just don't see a world where I could do it. They improved in a few places, yes, but they also still have all these things that have to happen if they want to show that improvement. NA, I mean, it's looking tough this year. A new team is joining the mix, and a few of those teams who were around the same level as last year arguably got better. As of right now, I rate Boston about the same as I did by the end of last year, or maybe a little bit higher depending on if they can meet a few conditions. I am projecting the Boston Uprising to finish anywhere from 15th through 10th place in the overall standings, and 10th through 6th in the West. I'm leaning more towards the lower numbers for both projections currently. There's so much about Boston that I'm just not sure about, and it doesn't feel like it's worth taking the gamble on them. And all these uncertainties have only grown in the last couple of weeks, really. They feel very mid. I genuinely prefer most other rosters out of the West. Their ceiling should be decent thanks to Striker and a few other things, but they've got to hit it out of the park with some crazy hard carry performances and a lot of development, and then they have to hope that the scary parts of the roster end up working themselves out. That's a lot to ask for. Just like last year, I am of the belief that they could be pretty scary if they figure things out, and they might be able to give a couple of high-level teams some trouble from time to time. A couple of upsets are definitely in the cards. This could even more so be the case than last year now, thanks to Striker and a serious underdog mentality and more consistency at support. But it's difficult to envision them doing anything crazy on a consistent basis due to the fact that their roster is not amazing on paper and they clearly have some problems to work out. I gotta say though, I would not be surprised in the slightest if Boston randomly decide to blow us away. When Striker played for this franchise in 2018, they had similar expectations. You know what? No, scratch that. They had even lower expectations. There were supposedly too many unknowns for them to compete at a good level. But guess what? They got 3rd place in the regular season standings that year and had a star player at arguably 4 of the 6 positions. Who's to say that something like that doesn't happen again? Maybe they rediscover the magic and they finish in the top half of the standings. The team itself may not look amazing, but the Boston Uprising are long overdue for a great year. What would be more fitting than doing it behind the same underdog mentality and the same superstar player that made it possible way back in the day? In my opinion, they'd be extremely lucky to finish top 10 or make the playoffs for that matter, but there's no way that I'm ruling out the possibility of a surprise year, and I say that for 2 reasons. For one, they have a good bit of talent going for themselves, it's just a matter of seriously unlocking their untapped potential. But 2, Overwatch 2 is a brand new game. The league is going to be way more unpredictable. The last time that we explored new territory like this back in Season 1, Boston were fantastic. Striker and the Boston underdog mentality are certainly back in full swing, and if you don't take them seriously, you just might regret it. And that pretty much wraps up my thought process behind the Boston Uprising. I'm hoping they're better than I think, but right now I lack confidence. But now I'd like to hear what you have to say. Do you like the Boston Uprising this year, or do you think they're just going to be mediocre? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, hitting like and subscribe would be greatly appreciated. And as always, thank you all so much for watching, and until next time, this is ATP, signing out. Peace.